The following is a discussion with Jordan Saucier AKA Sauci. He is a master guitarist, producer, DJ, and music scholar. Well, Jordan, it's been a while. Last time we did something like this, it was in the kitchen of a duplex in Provo. I don't know if you remember that setup.
Yeah. And now we're in an apartment in Orem.
And now something like that.
We'll have
right?
to bleep that out. That way people don't know where you live.
Oh, yes. They'll hunt me down.
Apartment in Orem.
Apartment in Orem. It's been how long since we've played together for the 80s band? Summer of 89.
At least over a year. Well, I mean, if we're going to say summer of 89, who knows? But if it's 80s rock, we last played Halloween.
That's true. Last year, yeah. And that was fun. It had been a while since we've all got together and played, so that was fun. We'll have to get the band back together, as they say, but we'll just have to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on the podcast. I've been meaning to catch up with you for a while anyways. I mean, it kind of gives me throwback vibes of Snow College days when we would have lunch and just talk about music theory or, whatever topic we were learning in our classes at the time.
Chromatic medians.
Exactly, yes. Those were some good times. So what are you up to nowadays?
Nowadays, mainly 2 or 3 things. I'm working at the Caleb Chapman Soundhouse 3 days a week. I do about 12 hours a week there, and then many hours outside of those rehearsals sometimes, depending on the week. And then I'm doing mainly 2 or 3 bands. I'm doing No Limits, the party band. I'm doing my own party band / just band that I wanted to always make. I've been doing that for a couple of years now. This past calendar year, maybe 18 months, it's been really kind of formed as what it needs to be. It's honestly sounding pretty good. And then usually it seems like I'm always playing with some other third band every now and again. So I'm way less the journeyman than I used to be 5 years ago. And I'd say one of my main priorities lately has been DJing. Been DJing a lot, learning that craft, finding my voice as an artist through DJing.
Yeah. Well, who would have thought you'd be doing DJing? I mean, did you think that back, when you were still getting the bachelor's degree and even when you're working on your master's, like that you'd be kind of doing some of the work that you're doing now to pay the bills, as they say?
Definitely not first when I was getting my bachelor's. About halfway through, if someone would have told me you're going to start DJing, I would have been like, yeah, I believe it. And then my master's, I pretty much had all the plans to DJ, and I just didn't still know what a DJ did yet. I remember even when I first bought a DJ controller, I still wasn't sure what a DJ did. I was like, so what are they actually doing though? Like,
just move the the little
yeah, I was like, I didn't even know what that was about. Like, I knew it when I saw it, but yeah. And so that is kind of funny, even as a musician and knowing what I think I knew.
Yeah.
And then some of my peers don't really know what a DJ does either, and then some of my peers do, and then maybe that's just because I've talked about it enough.
And maybe that's the case, but I mean,
yeah.
I think there's definitely different understandings of how much we know about the depth of what an actual DJ does, right? Like everyone's like, oh, I DJ'd my family member's wedding, right? But definitely not the same thing as what you're talking about and what you're doing, right? So,
yeah, I'd say the defining characteristic between DJing and real DJing is the mixing component, is really being beat mixed.
Yeah.
Having that's really the thing that I don't think I understood. I was like, what is it? It's being able to blend the songs seamlessly from one to the other to cater to a dance floor. And then while you're doing that, you have a good selection.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't think I ever would have anticipated myself DJing much before that. In fact, my freshman year at Snow, we had a roommate that was the DJ. And I remember kind of not being judgmental, but definitely thinking, wow, that's kind of like what we do but easier because you just have to play the songs. You just have to search them up. You just have to think of them, and then you can play them. And, that's sort of true, but it's not, because when you forget that when you're a full band, you have the advantage of people just being captivated because you're 5 people on stage.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just a different thing. But it's it's definitely been a surprise. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Just kind of wanting to do everything with music. When you're a DJ, you can play a lot of different styles of music. And then also at the same time, you can't ask me to do a Mexican wedding.
Yeah.
I did.
Really?
It was very hard. They were like, just play more stuff like this that you're playing right now. I'm like, I can hear how this music sounds. I could not tell you from this whole playlist what other songs in this language that I don't speak sound like this song.
Yeah.
I could not I like, and so it's humbling in that way too, in that regard, in that you can't play everything as a DJ.
Yeah.
If you're not, versed in that style, it's hard to do it. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been really great for my ability to perform as a solo artist. But also, I've never been a big fan of singing and playing the guitar, even though I've done it.
Yeah.
I somewhat kind of went down the wrong path and approached it the wrong way for the longest time. So I kind of got discouraged. If I went back around now and did it, I'd be much more successful with it. But I also think I'm yearning more for opportunities where I can have a bigger sound and where I can be more still independent, still a solo performer.
Yeah.
And incorporate the guitar here and there and things like that. And I'm excited for all the other things.
Yeah, no, and I think like when I first saw you on social media and then just, you talking about it also in person about starting to do that type of work, I was like, like who would have thought? Like to me, I was like, it does make sense, kind of if you're going to do the music thing, right? Why not also dabble in DJing as well? It's, it's like people that don't think they'll ever do live sound kind of a little bit, like they're just performers. And then a lot of performers kind of end up going, like maybe they're either a failed musician or they just chose a different path they found they had a like for or a love for doing live sound, for running the soundboard and, setting up all the microphones and things like that. It's sometimes when you're in that path, you're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Kind of like we were talking about earlier in the car with, one of our buddies that was like, oh, you're going to have to play, covers as well, or you're going to have to play live music if you're going to do one or the other, or if you want to be successful, pay the bills.
Yeah. I mean, that gets back to kind of like reverse engineering. Like, how do you think you're going to do that and make money with it? Well, you got to find examples of it being possible, unless you're going to be so groundbreaking that you're the first person to do it in your market. But that's a really good example of the sound engineer thing, because there are a lot of like classical or traditional musicians that enter into school and they're like, I play the French horn, but they also don't mind manual labor and they're technically minded and they can kind of get through the manual labor enough to where, once you do, I did stage handing. So I remember that was a lot of manual labor. I was like, man, like nobody wants to do this forever. At least most people don't.
And that's fair.
They want to get to the more technical, where they're paid for more of their technical skills.
Yeah.
But I was like, I can imagine a lot of people dropping out of playing their primary instrument to get into audio, because they're like, there's so much more work. It can be more professional. It can pay better, et cetera, et cetera. Why doesn't everybody do this?
Yeah.
That's actually what I thought too when I started to get into DJing and I started to learn what they earn in bars compared to what bands earned in bars.
Yeah.
And as well as like as being able to do private events. It's like, why doesn't every musician just learn how to do this? It's hard, but yet it's also not that hard, and it's very intuitive, especially if you're already musical. And it's one of those things where not everybody's interested in it.
Yeah.
I would not be interested in being full-time audio or owning my own audio company, even though there's a lot of earning potential and a lot of potential to grow and a lot of demand for it. A lot of people have audio needs. It's less saturated with audio. There's less audio hobbyists.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
there's
Yeah,
a lot of music hobbyists,
yeah,
and there's a lot of DJ hobbyists too. But I think the nature of it is the community. The bar is just a little bit higher, and as far as even people who do it as side work, they just know what they can command.
yeah,
And so the industry, I wouldn't say it's healthier, but it's just proportionally a little, the numbers just are a little bit bigger
yeah.
than, if you're trying to play at the summer festival in Lehigh with your
Right.
4-piece band. You're just going to command a little bit more if you're the DJ. But yeah, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I when I first wanted to study music, I didn't really, honestly, I had very like little background with music in general, but I just knew I had more of the songwriting kind of background and would write poems and stuff before I started playing guitar. But then when I started studying it, live sound is what I started gravitating towards because I don't know, I love gear, and there's some people we both know that we think of like the gear guys or the gear heads, like, one of them when we were in school that I can think was like Brian Wilson, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, that's what he does. But he also, plays, and does original music and, so, but, and, a lot of that has changed since then as well, like what we've all got into. But for me, I know once I was kind of introduced to it and given opportunity to kind of like, oh, okay, this is your soundboard right now. And you're in charge of, getting the mix right for this, whether it's just a small 1 or 2 piece, right? Maybe a guitarist and a singer, or then a symphony worth of amount of players on stage, right? I mean, once you get exposed to it, it's like you were saying, oh, why doesn't everyone do this? I think you either have the mind for it, like you said, that the technical mind for it and the love for it, or you don't. And the higher you get up in it, it definitely becomes way more stressful. Like, especially when you get into more of the technical boards, right? Like, but I think every musician should know how to work a basic analog board, right? If you can't run an analog sound board, I don't know what to say about that, but like you should know, like, okay, I'm going to turn up the gain on this microphone. Where do I do that? And like, okay, I'm going to EQ this a little bit. So I don't know if you feel the same, that everyone, if you kind of pride yourself as a musician, you should have some understanding of that. So
yeah, everyone should be well-rounded, and everyone could stand to benefit from being well-rounded in the sense that they're able to do a better job for the other people that they're working with if they understand how the gear works. Like, if you understand how microphones work, and you can perform with a microphone better.
True, yeah.
And the person who's working the other side of the microphone behind the board is going to be able to help you better from there, as opposed to if you just you think it's a volume knob. It's a little bit more than that. But yeah,
for sure. Well, I kind of want to go back a little bit. So
Okay.
we talked about kind of what you're doing now. I want to ask, how did you get started into music, and like what was the kind of the pivot point, maybe growing up, like you knew that's the route you wanted to go in life, like that was your calling.
well, I first got started into music when I kind of got into music. I spent most of my childhood being pretty apathetic about music. I didn't care to listen to it, and I think that's how a lot of people are. But I don't really remember much anymore. But
All right, fair enough.
but I definitely recall just not really caring about music, and then all of a sudden kind of starting to connect with some CDs that we would play in the minivan on the way home from school.
Nice.
And then I was starting to kind of go, okay, I like this radio station and the music they play here. Around the time I'm 13, I'm transitioning from childhood into adolescence. And then all of a sudden I just get so much into certain bands and certain music, and I feel so compelled and moved by, like, specifically, honestly, rock music.
Yeah.
And kind of the sound of the guitar. I think the guitar was the one that really spoke to me the most because of the vocal quality. And it was the music of AC/DC that really pushed me over the edge from being somebody that had actually taken music lessons very, very informally when I was younger.
Yeah.
And not really been able to sit and focus, and just being such a quirky person in childhood and allhood, that finally, yeah, I was just like, okay, I need to do this. I need to sign up for guitar lessons. And I was motivated to make it work. I never thought about quitting, even though I was sometimes frustrated. It was almost like, it's really interesting. I haven't thought about that aspect of it. I never felt like quitting, even when I felt like it was really difficult in a different way.
Like in just like learning like songs, or like, I mean, difficult in what, like, to, because it sounds like you were interested in it like full-heartedly. So maybe more the technicality of it, maybe.
Precisely. Yeah, like, in your first couple of years as a guitar student, you're taking music lessons in the back of a music store. Your instructor isn't always teaching you the hippest things.
Yeah, that's true.
So what I was learning, I wasn't really interested in it, but I was still super interested in the guitar, and I just almost followed it blindly. I was just like, well, this is what we're doing, like, But anyway, I that was in Mississippi for my early adolescence, and then it wasn't too long after that my family relocated to Utah. In high school, throughout high school, I would play in the bands. When I still lived in Mississippi, I actually found out they didn't have guitar in the marching band. Marching band's big in Mississippi, so that's the only reason why they have a music program at Mississippi high schools.
So marching band
is to so that they can play at the football games, which are huge. And so I played tenor saxophone for that. And then so when we came to Utah, I would, depending on the school that I was at the time, I would play a little bit of saxophone and the guitar and try to incorporate both. The guitar was always more my interest, but kind of to a point earlier where I like to think that I can do everything, even if I can't, or right. Even if I don't like to acknowledge that in some things in my mind are created more equally than others. And I'm actually just now getting to a point in my life where I can like own that, like, I'm not interested in this as much as I am this. I was always more interested in the guitar, but I just wanted to always keep playing saxophone still because I thought it was, I needed to do both, I felt like. It was really pivotal when I joined the School of Rock when I was a junior in high school. That was when it really I started to go from someone who really was lazy musically and maybe had some like natural skill and everything and was really passionate, to somebody who still was passionate and has some natural skill, but now had to put in more work to keep up with the other people who are in the same boat.
Yeah.
And so for those that don't know, the School of Rock is like an after-school music program where you put on rock shows, essentially. And you take music lessons, and the instructors there are very minded towards having you rock on stage. So in my guitar lessons, we started to learn things way more that were immediately interesting to me. So that was huge, and I was challenged in a way. Still not the best work ethic, though. Still.
Really?
Kind of a faking it till I make it kind of guy. And I still have to shake this to this day. There's been a lot of, speaking of DJing, oh my gosh. Part of the reason why it took me such a long time to get the hang of DJing is because I never practiced unless I was on the gig. And so I'd be good for 3 minutes, and then I'd have to transition, and then I'd be like, oh crap, how do I actually do this again? I'm gonna practice that transition when I get home and see if I can fight it. And anyway, now I know, obviously, but then at the School of Rock, I saw examples of other people who were making their living in the industry, whether it was people who had recently graduated high school, who were going to college for music, or it was just the instructors there. I'm like, well, these people obviously are working here and they're paying their bills, so worst case scenario, I'll work here.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be a bad gig, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy there were other opportunities besides that one.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it sounds like you're doing some things that you enjoy quite a bit right now.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah,
so
it worked out. But then I, that was what motivated me to audition for music school in college, and then because at the time I didn't really have any other front runners for other careers. I had a few other things that I was kind of maybe interested in, this and that, but nothing really compelled me a ton. And yeah, I would say from there, music school exposed me to a lot. That's where we met, obviously. Played in my first bands, earned my first paychecks as playing in bands at music school. Actually, I earned my first paychecks when I was in high school, playing at a local restaurant, singing and playing right my senior year. Got a few of those gigs right before I went off to college.
How much did you get paid? If you don't mind asking.
Oh yeah, go. I'm happy I'll remember this for the rest of my life. It's $25 plus food and tips.
Okay, nice.
For 2 hours.
And where was it at?
Pat's Barbecue.
Pat's Barbecue.
Giving
you first opportunity to make some money.
Yeah, and you know what I remember thinking was, oh my gosh, I only had to play for 2 hours instead of working for 3 hours, and I made $25 in those 2 hours, and I made $16 in tips, and I got a meal, and I played guitar. Are you kidding me? This is way better than working at the animal hospital, which to this day has been my only non-music job.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and so I made like $7.50 at the animal hospital. So after 3 hours of work, it was like a $20 bill.
Yeah.
And so then I'd go blow $5 at McDonald's, and I'd say, well, I just make $15 every shift. I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
Keeping gas in the truck,
Yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, I honestly thought that was great when I got that money, and it was I was very quick to want more after that, but I was also, I kind of also had to learn some things about doing a gig like that. You have to, like I spoke about earlier, the way I went about some things was a little I would redo it, like finding the right key to sing things in for you. I was given that advice, but I was still like, oh no, I'm hitting the notes. But, pro tip, the people in the restaurant don't want to hear you technically hit the notes. They want to hear you hit the notes in a way that's graceful, that doesn't make them turn around
and quiver
and go, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to have my dinner over here. They want to hear something that's easy. You got to make it sound easy. You can play Don't Stop Believin' on the acoustic guitar. Just don't do it in the original key.
Yeah.
They won't know, and / they won't care. Even if they do know, good music is good music. You're playing one of their favorite songs. Like, I wish I would have figured that out a long time ago, or else maybe I would have had more success with that format of singing and playing guitar. To this day, I still think singing and playing guitar is the most giggable format in any urban town, even more than DJ. I think DJ is close behind that, but I think every venue, there's some point in the night where they could have a time slot for a solo performer, and it would work well.
Yeah, even if it's 10, 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
I know around here in Orem, there's lots of places where, they have a night where they just open it up for like an open mic type of deal. And, those that play, they may pay them or they get a free meal out of it or something. And
Mm-hmm.
It's something small, but they see the value in it, and it brings more customers to them because their friends are going to come watch them, or their fans. And, a lot of people obviously love live music. It wouldn't be a thing if people didn't love it, right?
Right.
So, and which is weird because we're in the day and age where you can pull up YouTube, you can pull up any video on any platform and watch a live concert, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously not the same, but I mean, it's cool sometimes to see like epic shows from the past that, we will never be able to see, right? We were too young or whatever. But obviously, I think we both would rather go and see something live.
Yeah, well,
So.
I think it comes down to people want to be sung to. They want to be catered to in a way. It's more of an experience thing. Like a perfect example would be something that's a combination. There's a new spot in Draper called Hash Kitchen. Highly recommend. They do DJs. Their whole theme there is like they have turntables on the wall, graphics, and they have live DJs, which, depending on what your mindset is like, well, that's an oxymoron. Live DJ? Like, what's the advantage of that versus putting on just music? Because if you're around the corner, you can't see there's a DJ there. How do you even know there's a DJ there? But a great DJ is mixing the music in a way that really conforms somebody's experience, their access to remixes. And so I think it comes down to that people, they want that human touch, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Even if, whether it's singing and playing, or it's someone who is a talented DJ and can mix in a way that's entertaining and has maybe a few tricks up their sleeves, but also maybe remembers a couple of B-sides and C-sides that half the people in the room are going to remember vividly, but they haven't heard in 20 years. You know, sometimes that's powerful, and etc. Yeah, I think people are just seeking that, like, sharing music, sharing with each other, communicating in that way, communicating
That connection, I think.
Connection.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Mhm.
I mean, when you go to a live performance of some sort, whether it be DJing a band,
Mhm.
and everyone's there together, listening to the music,
Mhm.
jamming out. Whether it could even be battle of the bands, and there's a little bit of rivalry, right? Like, oh, I want this band to win. I want this band to win. But like even that, most people are pretty like civil and like pretty welcoming. At least in my experiences. Maybe different styles of music might be a little different. Maybe like really hardcore music. But even then, I feel like music's like very connecting, even if you've never met all the people in the venue. Like you go by yourself even.
Mm.
It's a very welcoming environment because of the performers, and it just builds that kind of unity and a safe place for pretty much everyone that's there, really, in my opinion. So
Yeah, it's a conversation starter. At least you're all there for the same reason or a very similar reason, and you all cared about it enough to show up.
yeah, that's true. That's all you got to have in common is one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's you just showed up, you're all at the same place. Kind of similar to, I think a little bit why some people really like going to live sports games is you're in a big room together. You have your team that you're there's that rivalry or sportsmanship, pride, in your team, but I think it's a little bit, it's kind of similar because you have music usually at those events as well too, but it's bringing everyone together in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's obviously a little bit of a different facet for
Mm-hmm.
entertainment, but
That's a different format for sure.
yeah. So, all right. Well, now that we kind of talked about how you got started, let's talk about what projects you're currently working on.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about your DJing. I know we talked a little bit about you want to show the camera your shirt. So which one you want to show it to. You talk about that a little bit and kind of what your inspiration was for kind of the brand and everything.
So this exact shirt is off of one of the print demand sites, which are a cool model. But ultimately I've decided to go a different route. So this is, you could almost call it a prototype, but this is my logo, SAUCI, for my kind of original music / just my DJ brand and my brand as a music professional. In general, my business, my LLC, it's kind of almost like a blanket umbrella brand for a lot of what I do. And I've been inspired by both the fact that I believe that it can be kind of like this entity. I remember having a mentor in a podcast type setting. I heard him say once that, if you can grow yourself to the point where you're an entity, that's, always a good way to have a permanence and a sort of a fixture in a scene or a community. And then also, shout out to James Hype, one of my favorite DJs. He, over the pandemic, if we can say that on here.
Oh, yes. We'll be fine.
Yeah. He built a clothing brand around his kind of DJ presence and called it Stereo Hype. So it's kind of connected to his brand, as his DJ name is James Hype. But it's also separate. I've kind of gone a different route where it's literally the same thing. But I really liked the idea of, instead of it being merchandise and you buying merchandise, you can buy the clothing brand and it represents something that's associated with the artist, but also separate. So for him, it was dance music, maybe house music, you could say, because that's his genre specifically. But it represented, a group of people. It's kind of a vague thing. Let's be honest, most brands, it's kind of an immaterial idea. It's kind of not really tangible, but it still represents something. And with mine, I kind of really wanted to represent the fact that I've been, getting into sort of gym life a little bit more. I've always been into running, but I've noticed since getting into gym life and since studying dance music, there's this whole offshoot of dance music that exists inside of gyms and working out, and a workout mix where it's like a DJ and it's remixes of popular songs and a different style, the dance style, it's usually sped up a little bit. And I was like, I kind of want to represent that. I don't know if anybody else does, but I feel that my workouts and my enjoyment of running or going to the gym changed big time when I could work out to a DJ mix. Like, I'll never go back.
Yeah.
I'll never go back to hearing Spotify end the song and then it plays. Like, I love it telling a story over 60 minutes, 3 hours, however long it is, and the energy being a certain way. Whether it's a low energy mix or a high energy mix, it just depends on what you're doing, in the gym that day, or if you're just going out on a walk or whatever. But yeah, I really wanted to build a brand about that. Starting out with just t-shirts, keeping it simple. I'd like to branch out to other things like hats, of course, and then other things that are associated with the fitness industry, like bottle blenders. Things that really help people. It ties the connection between dance music and fitness. I want to regularly do live streams that people can work out to.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so after the live stream is done, I can upload the set.
So it'd be like you're going to be DJing live, and then you're going to upload this whatever you did for that live stream afterwards. Okay.
Or something very similar that's slightly more perfected.
Okay. I
Sneaky.
see. Okay.
Yeah, things like that. And then also just, we know how a lot of Instagram pages are. They're almost just there for daily inspiration. I kind of want to be kind of like daily inspirational for people's well-being as it relates to fitness or dance music.
Okay.
So maybe it's, every personal trainer is going to have their own style, and every dance music artist is going to have their own style. And this is kind of where those two, well, once again, they kind of intersect. So, kind of release content and like inspirational quotes, maybe even examples of different exercises with house music and dance music in general. House is some of my favorite, but with it just branded around that, like style. It's a stylistic thing.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm doing.
There's definitely a market for it. I think I've never really thought about going down that avenue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very cool that you found that need and that desire that you can mesh that style of music and then the fitness together, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and that's something I've talked about before on the podcast, is like, what is the function of music? And that's a very open-ended question, right? Like, there's tons of functions to it. It depends on the person and depending on what you want to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
But that's a function, like that, I haven't done a ton of thought into, or haven't put a ton of thought into, is, the fitness side of things, like the motivation to work out and then building like a lifestyle around it with the music as well. So
yeah, because a lot of people are trying to party and also be healthy.
Yeah.
And the two aren't mutually exclusive, even if there's some things about partying that are objectively not helpful for your health. I think it represents a group of people who are going to say, hey, you know what, this is where we like to party, we like to dance. It's not good after leg day is dancing all night, but you're going to do it,
Yeah. Speaking from experience.
Yeah, actually, no, I don't dance, ironically.
Okay.
I'm the guy that stands like this in the corner and goes, how do I get up there?
Right.
In
Yeah.
the DJ booth.
That's fair.
Yeah, some things never change. I've always been like that. But yeah. So I would say that it's something where I'm kind of growing very slowly, figuring it out as I go, trying to make concrete steps moving forward, and do better each time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to strive for. So, no, that's an interesting take. I got a couple more questions for you, and we'll see where it takes us. But do you have like a favorite memory right now of like or experience of you performing? Like it can be from your, I mean, we talked about like one of your first paid gigs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anything from then to now, like it could be anything, but just like something that when you think back, you're like, you know what? That was like probably one of those moments that you're probably always going to remember. Just one of those performances. You're just like, I kind of made it a little bit, or you just loved it for whatever reason.
Man, I have various moments that I look back on fondly. There aren't too many performances that I can think back to that are perfect. There's always usually some element to it that's like, the catch, right? But
I know I'm really making you think here.
Yeah.
And like all limited to one. I mean, yeah, it could even be a place you went, like if that's easier. But
I tell you what, one that I do come back to very often because it was an example and it serves as an example to me to live in the moment and to truly appreciate when you're doing something cool and to not just think everything's just going to keep doing this, rising, and not things aren't always going to be up and up all the time. Is this one performance that No Limits did in Georgia in 2019, and we played to an Air Force event in a field. To I think the numbers were somewhere around 30,000 people.
Oh wow!
And I think I knew about that when we were getting there, but at the time I was playing with No Limits, and I had a lot of forward momentum at the time with the band, and I just thought that is going to last forever. And of course, a little less than a year later, there was a global pandemic, but I just remember eating at a restaurant after that gig being like, okay, what's next? Like, what's the next thing we're going to do? And not really thinking too much of like, that's more people than most musicians will ever perform for. And granted, we're a cover band and, we're not, I think of most musicians in general, like even a lot of semi-successful artists never perform for that many people or don't do it very often.
Yeah.
And when I look back at that performance, I'm just like, I think there's almost, in a way, the reason why I remember it fondly is one, I can put it on my bucket list. But two, I think it reminds me to make sure you're enjoying the process, because if you're not enjoying the journey, that's all there is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you just thought, okay, what's the next step, right? Not thinking, okay, well, maybe who knows if there is a next show even, right? Like I know I've definitely had those same thoughts before. I mean, obviously I haven't played for 30,000 people. I think that's quite the feat, so you should be definitely proud of that.
I mean, yeah, it was a crowd big enough to where you're just like, I can't see the end of it. And yeah, I mean, that was a period of big growth for me as a guitar player. It was, I was out of music school for only a year about at that time. So I just thought, okay, I'm just going to keep getting new opportunities all the time. And it's like, you're going to get shot out of a cannon for the first little bit, and then it's going to peter out unless you move somewhere.
Yeah.
I do believe that in Utah, your opportunities there's a lot of opportunity to survive and thrive. But as far as new experiences, I think those happen within the first couple of years. And then from then on, it becomes more of your business is growing.
Yeah.
But maybe you aren't covering new ground all the time. And, others' experiences may differ, of course. But that was something that I actually had to make an adjustment to right before the pandemic, as I was realizing. I was like, oh, okay. So there isn't always I'm not unlocking a new level every month. okay, that's something I got to get used to. I'm going to actually plateau, or I'm going to find that I have fewer opportunities maybe sometimes, you know.
Yeah, which in the case of the pandemic was true, right?
Yeah.
It a lot of those opportunities that you had lined up, ended
Mm-hmm.
up not being opportunities more. So
And it really is. I think I share this sentiment with a lot of people, aside from the fact that obviously the pandemic was horrible and, it was just detrimental public health wise and economically to so many people. It really was a reflective period, and it allowed me to take the opportunity to do new things like um, start producing music, um, and just various things. I think that's what made me realize I should start my own band, because I always thought, oh, I'll never make a band as good as No Limits, and I still don't think I will. I don't think I'll make a band as good as No Limits in the way that No Limits is good, but my band Sauci, I'm really proud of. The way I've kind of reimagined. Well, what could you do with a dance party band if it was more contemporary and slightly more like niche, slightly more B sides and C sides in dance music, and not so focused on wedding music. So
yeah,
I'm proud of that, and it allowed me to not feel like I was too busy gigging with No Limits to put together a show for that. And I may have not learned how to DJ. I may have still learned how to DJ for the pandemic, but it definitely makes you consider where you'd be had that not happened. But at the same time, also No Limits is going to be gigging more than ever right before all those gigs are canceled. So who knows? Who knows? But
yeah. I mean, you could try to look back and guess what would have happened, but like you said, that is a silver lining for I think a lot of people, whether it be in music or
mm-hmm.
just in life. The pandemic gave people a lot of self-reflection and times to maybe try things
Mm-hmm.
and get into things that maybe they wouldn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's good benefit from all of that, which is good if we get one pro thing
Yeah.
from that,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's pretty cool. I guess one of the other things I wanted to ask you was, as far as teaching, do you do very much like teaching guitar as well still, or?
No, actually. Remember earlier when I was talking about how I wanted to be the guy that, I do everything, I enjoy everything, music, everything. My music career is like a music buffet, and I'm gonna try everything, and I have tried everything. But no, I actually I retired from private teaching. I want to say earlier last year rather. Happy New Year.
Exactly right.
And yeah, it was it was an important part of my career. I think I saw it winding down actually before the pandemic. I think I was starting to recognize that until you become a very established teacher, um, or you just really get your pick of every student that you want, private teaching is kind of a different animal. It's kind of like if you love performing and singing your original music to an audience and you think, I want to make a living doing this, and then okay, so the way I make a living as a performer is in a wedding band, and then you realize that a wedding band is different than that. It's kind of like that same thing. You love the guitar and you love sharing your experiences with the guitar with other people, so naturally being a guitar teacher will be a good fit, right? Maybe, but also maybe not. And so I think for me, I realized that I enjoy the context more, sharing and helping people learn and grow with music, in which it's a group setting, and in which my role is really to push and to ask for excellence. And so that's where the sound house has really clicked for me as I'm working with groups there. But I taught my last few private lessons earlier this year. And I'll still teach a private lesson here and there, for certain instances, for certain people. But it's not a part of my income portfolio anymore.
Okay, wow. I actually did not know that you kind of stopped doing that
Mm-hmm.
as much. I kind of thought you were still doing it,
Yeah,
as like
I can
a
talk
nice
about
thing.
self-employed music career stuff all night, but I do believe that towards the end especially, you'd be surprised what a student here and a student there, and you'd be surprised what kind of bandwidth that takes up, even if it's low maintenance. and you're thinking, well, if I teach that student, that's like an extra this much a month, and that pays for this. You can't, unless you're really trying to make ends meet, you can't look at it like that. You got to look at it as like, you got to free up the bandwidth.
Yeah.
You gotta free up the bandwidth so you can accomplish more, and then just make sure you follow through with that. But yeah, in teaching is great, but I think it's one of those things where if you're really committed to it, it's better. It's kind of like most things. If you're gonna do it every so often, you almost need to charge even more for it. And the irony to that is, if you're doing it only every so often, you're probably not as good at it, and you're probably not as fast at it, as like we were saying earlier in the car. That may not be the case. At this point, now I feel like as a guitar teacher, I'm much more experienced as I was when I first got started. So if I taught a guitar lesson every now and again, it probably would still be pretty decent, hopefully, for the student. But as far as being efficient as a human being day in and day out, trying to cook my own food, trying to go to the gym, trying to free up time to do other opportunities like this one here at the podcast today. You can't put a price on just not having to be at a certain place at a certain time for 30 minutes.
Yeah. It's very little amount of time. Like you said, you can make a decent amount doing it. And I when I first graduated and stuff, I was teaching private guitar for a little while, a little bit of uke. But it was the bandwidth issue. And then I was always on call reserve for this company as kind of the backup, right? As the what's the word I'm thinking of? When you step in for another teacher, a sub. I was a sub, right? So I would have my students, and my portfolio was pretty small at the beginning, and the company would find students for me. And they made it seem like I was going to have a ton of students right off the bat, and it just wasn't the case. So I basically kind of became a sub for the company before they even started making my portfolio, and they kept telling me it was going to change, and then I was spending all this time to be a sub, and I was like, well, that's not really what I was wanting to do. That's not really what you hired me to be. So eventually I just kind of was like, I'm going to kind of do my own thing. And, for some people, they might be good with that, but it sounded like the other guitar teachers they had were leaving for the same kind of reason. They're having similar issues. But and then I got a call a couple weeks later, oh, this guitar teacher's leaving, you're going to have a full portfolio, all this and that. And I'm like, well, I've kind of already found some other things that I'm going to be doing. So, yeah, bandwidth, it's important to keep yourself open for the things that you're actually going to want to do long term, and that you feel like kind of worth it to yourself, for your longevity of your career. So,
yeah, and unless you're working in a space where they're getting you students consistently, and even then, even if they are, sometimes they don't always do that. You know what I mean? Sometimes it should be like, oh man, I haven't gotten a new student in a minute, and maybe that's nobody's fault. But the thing is sometimes you have 3-hour window open, and you might only teach 3 students that day, or maybe you have a great cancellation policy, and you get paid either way, but maybe half your students fall off the schedule for the summer.
Yep.
And it never seems like it's, once again, unless you are just so committed to it and you're a rock star and you've got your own marketing, like if you can fill up your schedule and be totally on your own and self-employed, in other words, have very few administrative mouths to feed, the studio coordinator, the owner of the music studio, etc., then obviously you can start to find out that you're going to earn a pretty good living for less than a full-time weekly hourly schedule. Granted, there's always more hours than the actual hours you're teaching. There's administrative work, and there's always more hours, but you can earn a pretty upper middle class living in that industry. But then you're mostly going to do that all the time. Yeah. And it just depends on what you want to do. And for me, for instance, I just was still, I would think about oh my gosh, if I'm teaching all the time, yeah, maybe my guitar chops or I'm a little bit warmer, but I'm also never wanting to play the guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you have to,
Yeah.
it's one of those things. Is like, should you do what you love doing as a profession? Because there's always saying, oh, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. It's like, well, that's not true at all, right? In my opinion, I mean,
Yeah.
maybe you enjoy it still because it's, I think it also depends on kind of to the level of how much you're doing something that you love, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, what were you gonna say about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I almost feel like I have my own sarcastic phrase where, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, or do what you love and you'll never love it again. I could come up with something like that. But yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's kind of true.
that can be a thing. But then also, like, for instance, I always felt like the part of the reason why I held on to private teaching was like, no, I love teaching. I love talking about music, obviously. Um, that's why I, love doing things like, this podcast where, we can kind of talk shop and things, but it feels like I'm not enjoying it. But it's because the context was wrong.
Yeah.
I needed to be like, I taught at Snow College for a couple of years. That was a much better fit as far as being able to talk to people about their music career and their opportunities and help them navigate some things. And then, obviously now I'm spending that time I spent at Snow College at the Sound House, and no longer a college academic environment, but it's still very geared towards always be pushing for professionalism. And that's why you almost have to find your tribe in a way. You have to find the environment that what you value is what they value.
Yeah.
And so pushing these young musicians to be the best that they can possibly be and make a show that even you, when you watch it, are enjoying, and you're just like, oh my gosh, is anybody singing this? That's super rewarding.
Absolutely. I'm sure.
And then even in rehearsals, working with a group is just a little less exhausting. It's more exhausting in some ways, but I mean, imagine having 4 30-minute lessons in a row where you don't connect with the student.
Yeah.
But imagine having 2 hours with a band where you don't really have to connect deeply with any one person. You just have to run the rehearsal, and your job is to put on a show. That's awesome, And so, that's kind of where my teaching world has gone. If I ever start playing more guitar again, my chops have atrophied, and I've actually been working on it just the last couple of weeks, trying to get back to where I was. I would like to have a guitar course someday. I always had imposter syndrome about something like that. I was like, no, there's so many other better players with better courses out there than me. What am I going to provide? But the truth is everybody has got their own approach to it. Somebody's going to like your musical style, first of all, and then your teaching style on top of that. And, you just got to do it. It's the same thing as, why would you write music?
Yeah,
there's so much music
people.
out.
Yeah.
The reason why people will still write music is because they're passionate about it. You almost have to look at it like that first. You kind of have to look at it as like you're passionate about it. And the market thing is important too. You got to know that there's a need for it, but I could see myself doing that. I would enjoy that as well.
Well, if you make a course, I'll be one of your first people to take it.
Yeah.
Because I want to learn more, and I talking about the atrophy thing. There's definitely a lot of my chops that, I still do a lot of songwriting, but as far as like performing a lot, I haven't done that in a little while. I've gotten a little bit better with doing live sound, with opportunities being hired from production companies. A couple months ago, I was able to run sound for Abe Parker, if you know who that is.
Maybe.
He's an up-and-coming artist that's from Georgia, and one of his big hits, Butterfly. It's all like, in Utah, he has a really big basis too, but I think that has 83 million streams on Spotify right now,
cool.
or something like that. But I had an opportunity to run sound for him and become friends with him and his bassist, and that was a really cool experience, But then there's other areas I've noticed too with like my guitar chops. I'm like, oh yeah, I've gotten a little bit better with doing like working with some different mixers and sound systems.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, like then I'll be working on a song. I'm working on a couple singles myself. Then I'll try to be playing something. I'll be like, oh, that's I have to run that again. I didn't think I would need to, but I guess I got to, you know, like,
Yeah.
but I mean, the nice thing about working in the production side, which I'm sure you know, is when it's very telling of where you're at as a guitarist and a performer, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for instance, I know you've been working with your own mixing and mastering, right, at your studio. So maybe talk a little bit about that, and some, maybe a good example of where focusing on the production side has helped you with your chops.
Oh, for sure. You know, that's part of the reason why I still do some guitar session work. Even that is kind of like private lessons in the sense that it comes and it goes, and it comes at a time when you're like, I was really gonna work on my originals this week with my nights off that I'm not gigging, but I'll do this guitar session work. And the reason why I take it is, you know, I am always looking to you know, earn something, but also because of it really helping with my chops. Because when you're in the studio and you're recording, and even if the studio, quote unquote, is your room or your living room or wherever it is, you're having to listen to the parts back every single time. And also, so from a performance standpoint, like performance on the guitar, your ability to execute the part physically, and then also in a lot of instances your awareness of what a good part is, and your sensibility to choose. You know, as guitar players, we're so shape based, so to choose to omit the highest string and or the lowest string, your ability to hear how much space it should take up, etc., etc. Just all those things you have to become much more aware of. Especially when you're by yourself, because if you've got to send the guitars back and forward, unless you're in a creative project like an original band or something, the producer and artist that you're working with don't have time for that. Even if you're not charging them for those revisions, they don't have time for that. You've got to get it 90% right. In fact, you really need to get it right enough to where it's there's flexibility that the producer can work with it. So you've got to just be super aware, because you don't have any feedback. You know, it's lower pressure in the sense that you're by yourself. You can take all day and say, yeah, I spent 2 hours on it. You know, you can do whatever you want, but it really heightens your sensibilities. But on the downside, because you can sit in a chair and hunch over the guitar, it also means that you might be warm and you might feel like white lightning. But then you go on stage to rock, and then things feel different. So I realized that just this other weekend when I was warming up in the hotel room for our New Year's Eve gig. I thought to myself, what we work with the kids, the young musicians at Soundhouse with, about you guys got to be rocking out in rehearsal from day one. It really is so true, because I rehearsed this Jesse's Girl guitar solo a bunch of times, because I was like, we're going to play this tonight. It's my one guitar solo the whole night, because we play a lot of dance music, you know?
Yeah.
And so sometimes for me, it's like going from 0 to 60. I'm playing all these rhythm guitar parts with, I think to get nerdy, the physiology of rhythm guitar, it's grip.
Yeah.
It's not dexterity. It kind of is, it kind of isn't. And I think it's different than, like, let's say piano. I think chords are more similar to dexterity. Anyway, that's just a theory I have, that pianists playing rhythm versus lead those are more similar for them. But anyway, that's beside the point. That's just a theory I have. It's an excuse I have, rather.
I think there's truth to that, though.
Yeah. So I was in the hotel room practicing this Jesse's Girl guitar solo on the bed, the edge of the bed. I was like, yeah, I think I got it. And then I remembered from the night before, it was a multiple night gig, that rocking out hard kind of threw me off a little bit. I was like, let me rock out. Let me practice doing this rocking out. And sure enough, in the hotel room, I was like, oh, I'm missing it. I had the metronome on, and I was like, I'm like a fret off, or like I'm having to stop rocking out to get the notes right. And so then I spent another 10 minutes on it. I had a few minutes to spare. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of it now. And then when we went out to play it, I nailed it. And I had zero regrets
Awesome.
because I spent the time actually playing it like I was I felt like I was 13 years old again. Just pretending like I was a rock star unplugged and next to a bed.
Yeah.
It really is. You can think you're academic this and you're academic that, and you've been playing for so long. You got to practice the way you play, especially if you're not playing often enough. And in my case, that's me. I'm kind of like somebody who's been playing for 2 years, because I'm just not playing often enough to where running through something sitting down does not translate the same way. And, maybe other people don't have to do that, but it doesn't matter. I do. And I will do it because it's worth it. But, kind of little meandering there, but that kind of...
No, it was good. I mean, so what you're saying is if you practice, you're going to get better at what you're practicing. So if you're practicing rocking out, like how maybe you're going to be doing some moving on the stage, right? Mm-hmm. And then you practice that and then do it on the stage. It's going to sound a lot better than, like you said, just sitting down,
mm-hmm.
which I think makes a big difference. When we were playing in our 80s band, all the time, there was times when we'd learn a new song and all of us were like, yeah, we think we know it. And then we'd play it live and the whole, it'd be very telling if we've rocked out to it before. And, and sometimes, it had to do with did people actually know their parts, right? Which occasionally happened. But performing practicing how you're going to perform.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's super important. And that's exactly what you should be teaching those kids, because
mm-hmm.
that's going to make them further than 90% of other musicians that don't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like some are going to have that natural ability and somehow they pull it off, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just performers. But
mm-hmm.
for most people, yeah, I think for me, I'm the same way. I kind of have to perform or practice how I'm going to perform.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, and I think the more you play, the more you're actually practicing the guitar sitting down, and the more you're out performing live, the less that might start to matter. But I think what happens is in most professionals, even the people who play a lot, they find that they don't always have time to play a lot. I think the cruise ship musician, for instance, that's playing 6 nights a week, they're never going to have that issue.
Probably not.
They're just permanently warm. Or the person in Nashville playing on Broadway 6 nights a week. That's literally packing up their guitar and going downstairs to the gig downstairs. Like, it's probably less of an issue. But in my instance, where I've kind of shifted around, because truly, when I play the guitar and when I DJ, it's low risk. You definitely have to have a good ear, and you have to be able to quickly assess what key you're in. And some songs are just like, you'll think it's one chord progression and it turns out to be something kind of wacky and you're like, what the heck? And you have to be able to assess that quickly, but the whole time you can kind of float. Especially like when you're playing a guitar solo, you can really float. It's less offensive when you're kind of floating and maybe playing in the cracks a little bit, playing some licks in the cracks, and there's not a rhythm section behind you that's like, come on, man, like, lock her down, when it's more of a novelty to begin with. I think it is more than a novelty. I think there is an art form to it. I think it can be really special when it's a really tight routine meaning like, oh, I go from this song to this song and I throw in these licks here and it just all lands perfect and it's very entertaining to watch, that type of thing. I think there can be an art form, but fundamentally it's more cool that I'm playing the guitar and you didn't expect me to be playing the guitar because I'm a DJ.
Yeah.
That's really where a lot of the novelty is, of course. But yeah.
Well, I think that gives you freedom to do things that, like you said, maybe people wouldn't expect normally.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and here's the thing, you're only half a step away from the right note, right?
That's right.
So,
yeah.
Well, with that, I'll end with this last question. What is your biggest influence right now? As far as it could be an artist, it could be maybe a DJ, or maybe even a mentor. Like right now, in your current music career, what is the biggest influence that you've noticed, and kind of why do you think it's influencing you so much?
Oh my gosh, dude. The easiest question of the night is James Hype. I don't know what it is about this guy. I'm kind of a big fanboy.
Sounds like it, yeah.
But this guy, this guy, I just am like, I don't think everything he does is right or amazing, or I don't like I'm not just like I want to be him. Like I don't feel like that, but I just feel like, oh my gosh, I just connect with the like his he's so inspirational in the sense that he hasn't been around forever, but he kind of took the world by storm. But at the same time, he didn't. He's like one of those classic cases of overnight success, but at the same time, he absolutely wasn't. It was like a 7-year overnight success, that type of thing.
Okay.
But also at the same time, how long is 7 years? Not that long.
Yeah, depending how you look at it,
yeah.
It flies by super fast.
Yeah, and just the way he approaches making music. I think in the long term, just because of the way I come from rock music, which is, in my opinion, the ultimate open format genre.
I would agree.
Yeah. Open format, for anybody who doesn't intuitively know what I'm kind of meaning, is kind of like a term that we say in the DJ world when we mean just like you can play any genre. Think kind of like a cover band that plays a wide variety of just popular music. I think I don't want to be straight house. James Hype is straight house. All his music is straight house. I see myself eventually moving to a format kind of like Zed, where he's got pop songs on the radio that are this tempo, and then other songs that are this tempo and this style, or like Skrillex has house records and dubstep records, and all the Dead Mouse too, and just being a little bit more open format. But I just really connect with the way he hears house music. I connect with the way he DJs. In a nutshell, the way he DJs is way more hands-on. You can really hear him mixing, which as a live performer, growing up that way, like I just connect. I like to hear the struggle from, like, I think that's part of the reason why I connected with Angus Young, is because he was fighting the guitar because it was half the size of him.
Yeah.
From Angus Young from AC/DC, that is. And so I really connect with that. His use of merging the heavy world with the pop world. He uses acapellas on one playing deck, and he'll mix it over something that's very otherwise not accessible. So he'll have like this really sped up 50 Cent vocal playing over a house track.
Okay.
So all of a sudden it becomes accessible, and then he'll loop it, and then he'll spin back, and he just has like this wide vocabulary, for a DJ, from not actually creating the sounds on the spot and ultimately playing the records. He just has a really unique way. So he's just been so influential, as like with the clothing brand thing, as I mentioned earlier.
Do you have some of his clothing?
I do. How did you know?
I had a feeling.
Yeah, I have 2 of the shirts, and half of that for me is like I'm researching. I'm kind of going, okay, how nice are these shirts actually? And I'm like, okay, they're pretty nice. They're pretty resilient. They don't feel like they're boutique, but they feel like they gotta be nice. Okay, and what is he selling them for? Okay, he's selling them for this much. Okay, he's a lot more famous than I am, and so it kind of serves as a source of inspiration for me. And then also just the way he makes content, for the socials, and his ability to go viral. And so he's just been super inspiring to me. And I've always felt like as a guitar player, I've been pulled in a lot of directions. Like I never felt like I fully subscribed to the John Petrucci of Dream Theater School of Playing Guitar. Like I was always equally interested in thinking, oh, John Petrucci's the best ever, as much as I felt that Pat Metheny was the best ever, as much as I felt that John Mayer was the best. And so I always felt like I was pulled in so many different directions as a guitar player, and I loved that. But I never had like one person that is going to truly teach me the instrument, and I just feel like James Hype's really been like...
He's hyped you up.
Yeah, he's really hyped me up in the sense that I feel like I'll just learn everything that he does. Like I feel like I bought both of his courses that he's got, that he's collaborated with some of the online DJ kind of course providers. They collabed, and they made some production course as well as a DJ course.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so I bought both of those, and I'm just like, because of how wide my source of musical inspiration is, because of how many different things I've studied, like yourself. I'm not afraid of accidentally becoming a copy, just because I know inevitably I'm different. But I'm just like, he's just like, I'm like on the James Hype Bible right now. So that's the easiest question tonight, is like James Hype. He is so inspiring to me, and I'm just learning everything I can from him.
Okay, well, that's awesome.
Yes, sir.
Well, where can people find information to contact you if they want to get in contact with you for production or whatever it may be?
Yeah. So my email is my first name JORDAN dot my last name SAUCIER dot music@gmail.com. I've also got a website, that has a fill out form. That's just my first name, last name.com, jordansaucier.com. Under construction, perpetually.
I love it.
And on Facebook, I believe it's Sauci 0, facebook.com/Sauci 0. Instagram is @Sauci 3_. And then YouTube is my channel name is Sauci, SAUCI. And those are the main ones. Those are the main places.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure that those are posted also in the description so people can find it. So,
sweet.
Jordan, thanks again for being here, and I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to talk shop again in the future. So.
Oh yeah.
All right. I guess we're doing a high five.
Let's do it.